Ho, 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 and welcome to the Winecast. In anticipation of Christmas, I thought I might do another food and wine pairing video with that holiday in mind. But unlike Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, at least in the US, is a much more diverse meal, with individuals and families often having traditions that are unique to themselves about what they eat for that holiday, while others use it as an opportunity to explore different food traditions each year. I have noticed, though, that something that stays relatively consistent from year to year, at least as far as American Christmas celebrations go, is dessert, with a fairly short list of sweet favorites appearing again and again. So I thought Christmas might make a good opportunity to broach the topic of wine and dessert pairing. This cast is actually meant to be a little more jovial than practical, not because the advice I've got to give is unsound, but because the reality is that most Christmas desserts are served as part of a buffet, and most folks pile all sorts of different treats onto their plate after the main meal, so it's really unlikely, unless you're with a group of very serious wine heads, that you'll be carefully pairing one wine to a particular dessert. So take this cast more as a start to thinking about pairing wine and dessert in general than as a manifesto for what to run out and get before Yuletide is upon you. So where do you start when it comes to pairing wine and sweet Christmas fare? Well, you start by saying relax. Listen, you've already got enough on your plate, so to speak, with juggling family and social obligations, to say nothing of holiday shopping or just staying jolly. So you'll be glad to know that just about everything you need to know about pairing wine and dessert can be summed up in three simple rules of thumb. First, and this is the golden rule of dessert and wine pairing, make sure the sweetness of your wine matches or exceeds the dessert that you're pairing it with. Second, the best strategy when choosing a wine is to match the flavors and aromas in the dessert with those in the wine. And finally, keep an eye on the acid profile of both your dessert and the wine you're thinking of pairing with it, with the goal being to make sure that they're in sync with each other. Let's look at each of these in detail. First off, sweetness. I touched on this in my cast on dry wine and chocolate, a thoroughly bad idea, by the way. And if there really is such a thing as a rule when it comes to food and wine pairing, this may be it. When pairing a wine with any food, let alone dessert, make sure that the wine is at least as sweet or sweeter than what you're matching it to. Don't skimp on this, or your wine is going to taste thin and tart because of the relative way in which our palates perceive taste sensations like sweetness. Be sure, though, that whatever wine you choose, the sugar and acid in it are balanced, or the wine will taste dull and cloying, and you'll have nothing on your palate except unrelenting wave after wave of sweetness. And don't be afraid to exceed the sweetness of your dessert, at least somewhat, with even low-sugar, very sophisticated desserts like fruit and cheese plates benefiting from a good dose of sugar in the vino. All of that said, be considerate of your guests and recognize that there are wine drinkers out there, God bless them every one, that refuse to drink sweet wines on principle, or worse, swear that a wine is too sweet for them, while eating slice after slice of fruitcake packed with those red and green candied cherries and pineapple bits that are more sugar than fruit. There's no sense in ruining the evening over it, but anything you can do to help convince them not to chase that with a dry Syrah would be a mitzvah, not to mix my holidays. Matching flavors is exactly what it sounds like. Whatever flavors and aromas are at play in the dessert should be at play in the wine. So, pair berry pies with wines that have berries on the nose and palate. Apple cobblers with wines redolent of apple and other tree fruits. You get the picture. Can you contrast flavors when pairing? Of course you can, but that's trickier and riskier since the number of options is greater, and it takes practice to develop real finesse in contrasting pairing. So think of that as something that you'll want to experiment with a bit. Finally, while a sweet wine should always have enough acid to balance its sugar profile, your wine's acid should also be in sync with what it's being paired with. So even if a wine with relatively low sugar and acid is in balance, that wine might not be the best pairing with a dessert that's quite tart, or at least more tart than the wine. Thankfully, very tart desserts aren't a huge thing on most Christmas menus, but if you come across one, and it'll usually be fruit-based as opposed to chocolate or nut-based, then a sweet sparkling wine might just be the ticket. Usually, you'll want it to be a demi-sec level or sweeter wine, so around 3% or more residual sugar. Sweet sparklers can also be your ally when it comes to versatility, pairing remarkably well with a wide range of desserts, with the only major exception being chocolate-based desserts. Now, that all sounds good in the abstract, but how about some real-world pairing suggestions for your Christmas dessert buffet? I'm game, so here's a pretty quick run-through of what you might find for dessert and what you might pair with it. And for round one, let's start with berry pies and tarts. What's a good pairing for these? Lots of things, actually, with the old standby being port, but I think the Grenache-based Vendu Naturel of the Roussillon in southern France can be more interesting. They tend to be a little lighter and brighter than many ports, and they can have an interesting herbal quality that I think plays well with the berries. Or you can go way over the top with a late harvest Zinfandel that'll stand up to the jammiest berry tart of them all. And if you really feel fancy, see if you can find some Brachetto d'Acqui from the Piedmont. It'll be lightly fizzy, singing with red berry flavors, and lusciously sweet. I think all of these wines are also good options for pairing with chocolate-based desserts as well. Round two, tree fruit pies and cobblers. For these desserts, go with wines like sweet Rieslings or Moscato d'Asti that'll highlight the apple, pear, and or peach notes in the pies and cobblers, or Gewürztraminer that'll also show those fruits and will bring some spice to the party. For very sweet, complex, and sophisticated fruit desserts that sometimes have semi-savory qualities like citrus rind and honey, go for something affected by botrytis like a Sauterne, a Hungarian Tokai, or a botrytis-affected Riesling, or an Alsatian Sélection de Grand Noble. Pumpkin pie? I favor a pretty sweet Gewürztraminer or Riesling, with my preference being for the Gewürz because its aromatics will match better with what's likely to be going on in the pie. These next two, Christmas cookies and the much-maligned fruitcake, may seem like they're worlds apart from each other, but I think they both go with the same pair of wines, though for slightly different reasons. I would pair either a sweetened Oloroso sherry that you'll usually see designated as a cream sherry, or an Italian Vinsanto with either of these. Why? Well, Vinsantos and cream sherries aren't likely to be mistaken for each other, but at heart they're both wines made from white grapes that have undergone long, somewhat oxidative and even madderizing aging. At their best, they both have a spicy and nutty character that plays well with the spice and nut-based cookies that you see at Christmas. And there's even a tradition in Italy of serving little cookies called cantucci along with Vinsanto for dipping. The oxidative character of both wines also makes them a good pair with the nutty, yeasty flavors of most fruitcakes. I actually think that Vinsanto is the slightly better pair for the cookies, and the cream sherry for the fruitcake, but only slightly. Also, I don't normally mention producers by name, but two producers each make a very good sweetened Oloroso that isn't marketed as a cream sherry, and I wouldn't want you to miss them because those words aren't on the label. They're Williams & Humbert's Dry Sack Medium Dry Sherry and Lustau's East India Solera Sherry. Finally, my personal favorite, pecan pie, or pecan pie if you roll that way. Consider a Muscat de Cap Corse from the French island of Corsica. This is an intensely concentrated Muscat-based wine that often shows caramel notes that I think go really well with pecan pie filling. Or try a Pedro Jimenez that'll be intensely sweet and raisiny and that I think will make for a nice contrast with what's going on in the pie. Okay, it's Christmas, so how about a bonus pour? And what a doozy this one is. Peppermint. I can't ever remember anyone actually eating all of those candy canes that are usually strewn all over the dessert buffet at Christmas dinner. But thanks to the more recent popularity of peppermint chocolate bark, there's actually a chance that you might be tempted to get a mouthful of the stuff along with your pie, fruitcake, and cookies. So what's the problem with that? Well, let's be real. Peppermint is sort of like that loud, obnoxious family member that you know you have to invite to Christmas, but that you also know will spend most of the evening talking loudly, nonstop, and otherwise calling attention to himself, and who just doesn't get along with anyone. Okay, maybe I'm projecting a little of my own family crazy here, but peppermint is hard to pair. I've successfully paired garden variety fresh mint in savory dishes and in small doses with red wines like Syrah and Malbec that can show some similar notes. But peppermint in candy canes is so brash and over the top that it tends to crowd everything out, and I have yet to find the wine that can stand up to it. Maybe, and this is a big maybe, a port-styled wine made from Syrah, preferably Australian Shiraz actually, that shows some mint and some eucalyptus. But honestly, my hopes aren't high. So if you must have some peppermint bark, or worse, an actual candy cane, then maybe a mojito? I don't know, just a thought. Thanks for joining me for another Winecast. If Christmas is within your tradition, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a joyous holiday season. Whatever your tradition, I hope that you got something valuable out of this cast and that it got you thinking about wine and dessert pairings. If it did, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and always feel free to leave a question or comment. I'm your host, the Unknown Winecaster, and I'm out. Enjoy the grape, but always enjoy it responsibly.